Welcome to the Zero Trust Journey podcast, created by cybersecurity practitioners for those walking the same path. We share real stories, hard lessons, and hard-won victories from the field, so you can sidestep the pitfalls and deliver the wins. Grab your coffee, tune out the buzzwords, and let's get into the real story, right here on the Zero Trust Journey podcast.
Welcome, everyone, to another session of Zero Trust Journey podcast. My name is Victor Monga. I am producer and co-host of this podcast. With me, I have my co-host, Steve. You want to introduce yourself quickly? It's been a while.
Yeah. Thanks, Victor. Hey, everybody. Steve Turner, co-host here on the Zero Trust Journey podcast, and happy to welcome our guest, Mark Simos. Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, super excited. We're joined today by Mark Simos, lead cybersecurity architect at Microsoft. Mark has spent over about 25 years. Mark, I was going through your LinkedIn, and it's very impressive. Helping organizations define clear roles, responsibilities. I think that's your niche. You kind of really have the technical aspects, but you focus on the roles and responsibilities, which actually sets up every organization for a success for future architectures to strengthen their defenses. Mark has been a key voice in Microsoft's security community. I see all the badges, all the certificates you have, and continues to guide how enterprises operationalize Zero Trust in the real world. Mark, again, welcome to the show.
Thanks. I guess I've collected a lot more than 37 pieces of flair over the years.
Nice. Mark, I'm going to set the stage for our audience as well. You have been with Microsoft for more than 2 decades. How has the role of a cybersecurity architect evolved over that time?
Oh, quite a bit. I don't know that we even really had a lot of security architects. I think we probably did maybe in our consulting practice, kind of in the early 2000s when I joined. But I've done a lot of different jobs at Microsoft. I've been a support engineer. Thank you for calling. What's wrong with your Active Directory? And I bet you it's DNS. You only know NetBIOS and Wins at the time.
Sure. Yeah. DNS is always a problem. I used to have a t-shirt, actually. It's DNS. Yeah.
I used to be able to close my eyes and walk people through it without even having to look at the interface because I had gone through it so many times. Wow. Okay, here, this
That's
one.
impressive.
Yeah. I've done a lot of different roles at Microsoft, starting as a support engineer and then a field engineer and then consultant in the field. And then, about halfway through it, I guess less than halfway now because I've been doing it for a while. Sometime in the early 20-teens, I switched over and focused on cyber full time. And so I've been doing versions of this cybersecurity architect job over the course of that because Microsoft security business went from basically 0 to 20 plus billion or whatever we are now. And so just being inside the scale of the operations of that business and watching all the learnings and the mechanisms, and that's been a huge amount of learning for me as well. I was even temporarily titled a business architect at one point for a very short period of time.
Yeah. So Mark, with that, what inspired you to focus on the intersection of architecture, operations, and security? Being in the trenches probably was some of it, but could you tell us a little bit about your journey into wanting to kind of be that kind of architectural focus? And please lay in all the goodness about the MCRA, the CISO workshop. I know that I was a big fan, so.
Yeah, because I went from a very technical support engineer of getting into the details of why exactly this wasn't working and the different, registry flags and whatnot that would cause things to go south or that you used to repair them and stuff. Very, very detailed stuff there. And, as I switched more to a customer facing role, not just answering the phones, but actually working with them and helping them solve problems, even as a field engineer, I started to appreciate how important it was that the technology was one piece of it, but how the people managed it, what they understood about it was a huge part of it. So even sort of the IT period of my career, I started developing an appreciation for that. And then early in my cybersecurity period, I was, did the Pass the Hash white paper, version 1 and version 2, co-authored that. And then, we then wanted to have an architecture to help people secure their credentials and provide them a secure admin workstation that wasn't reliant on a potentially compromised Active Directory, right? And so we realized that ultimately what we were solving is an operational problem because the IT admins had to use it. They had to want to use it, had to be usable for them because they had to do their job on it, right? And if we break it as a security team, it wasn't very helpful to them. But in that same era, I also made a different realization independently, which was I was presenting and trying to convince people to do this very complex admin forest architecture over and over, like 10, 15 times a week. I would have different customer facing sessions. And through that period, I sort of made this realization that I wasn't really a technologist anymore. I was a storyteller that was telling a story and communicating things and getting them from my head and the people that we worked with into our customers' heads. And so I was much more of a storyteller that told technology and cybersecurity stories to help people understand them and have it land there so that then they could employ all the wonderful goodness in their heads and their fingers and keyboards and computers, right? And so that was a big transition for me, and that sort of was another milestone.
Mark, did that storytelling skill, let's say, came to you organically, naturally, or do you have to actually go through some sort of training, or did you gravitate towards because of whatever it was feeding you, nourishing you, or it was something that you just picked it up along the way and you realized, oh, that's who I am today?
That's a great question. It was actually a mix of things. So some of the stuff, like the first thing you learn in support is managing customer expectations, right?
Sure.
If they expect you're going to solve everything and it's going to be a perfectly running Corvette when they drive in with an old Pinto, right? Like you're no matter what, they're not going to be satisfied, and that's going to hit you on your satisfaction thing. So like some of the elements of that I had early in my career, right? But then as I realized and kind of it dawned on me that I was doing storytelling more, I started buying different types of books, right? I started buying storytelling books. I started reading different types of articles. I sort of immersed myself in that discipline, learning about, because at the end of the day, our brains are narrative, right? That's the only way we can process all the visual and other crazy information we have. And so like understanding psychology and how we filter it and the kind of biases we have, all that stuff sort of spawned off of that. And so
Anything would you recommend to our audience? Anything come top of your mind, or still you keep it on your desk every now and then you look at it, the books?
let me see if one of them sticks out at me here.
I don't know. There might have been a little book that Mark wrote.
Well, yeah, there is that one. Yeah, I got that one here always at the ready.
It's the Bible. I've got it on my desk here. Like it's yeah, but is there anything to Victor's point, is there anything that kind of comes to mind, like, other than the Zero Trust Playbook, which totally recommend our listeners or viewers?
Yeah, I mean, I would just look at like, the different reviews and ratings and whatnot, because there's a few professional storytelling books, a few professional like presentation ones that kind of get into storytelling behind it. But the thing that I found is like what I end up using a certain couple of them. Like it's a problem to solution mapping, right? The problem is Dorothy lands in Munchkin land, right? And happens to knock out the Wicked Witch of the East. And then, we find out that where she's trying to get to is the Emerald City, and we have to figure out the yellow brick road along the way, right? So it's a problem, journey, solution, right? And I love the name of your podcast, by the way.
Thank you.
It's about that journey and how do I get from there? You have to know where you're going, and then you have to figure out how to get there, right? And the story is the same way. And so that's been a huge part of it. And then I try and apply those skills as I go through and build things like it was mentioned earlier, the CISO workshop, kind of that program and strategy and governance. What does security end-to-end look like at that actually at that altitude? And then the next layer down is our cybersecurity reference architecture at Microsoft, the MCRA, as people like to say. And that's the end-to-end technical piece of it. And so each of those, the first version was a diagram, right, of MCRA. Second version was, here's a collection of similar diagrams. They're all complicated that people seem to like. And then the third version was, we should probably explain what end-to-end security looks like at a technical layer and then show the diagrams in the context of that. And so there's definitely a lot of evolution and learning as we go. I apply those as much as possible. Like, here's the problem. Here's the anti-patterns. Here's what everybody screws up. Yeah, whether they need to or not, they all get faced with the same amount of information, the same amount of biases, the same amount of industry best practices, which may or may not be the best practices. And here's where it goes wrong. And now here's how to overcome those and get to a better place. So again, that story of the journey. Yeah.
Yeah, Mark, I follow you on LinkedIn, and in one of your recent articles, you emphasize the importance of defining security roles and responsibilities. So again, I want to shift gears here from the technical aspect to what you have been evangelizing recently. Why do so many organizations still struggle with this foundational step of defining security roles and responsibilities?
There's a couple different reasons. I think we've defined the industry writ large as a technical problem to be solved, right? Implicitly. We don't say this out loud that if we solve the technology, then all the risk goes away. But people kind of believe that because no one's ever spoke it up and then said, that does sound kind of stupid. So part of it is just that we haven't
Well, you're hearing it, so that's
right. And so the thing that we found, and this is really at the core of it, is a lot of the things that we do end up reinforcing that, right, without us meaning to. So if you take someone that's been a technical person, for most of their career, and they get promoted to a chief information security job or a CISO job, and they don't do that same thing that I do with storytelling. They don't immerse themselves in the business and immerse themselves in the people and the thinking and the models and the way things work, across just, business leadership, business management. If you don't do that, you're going to be in a world that you don't understand, a stranger in a strange land, as it were, right? And so when you go and you talk about risk, you're going to be talking about speeds and feeds and this and scans and exploits and blah, blah, blah to board members that have no clue. And you're going to sound like Charlie Brown's mom or the Charlie Brown's teacher, right? Going, yes, Bob. And what does that lead to? And the thing that people don't realize that happens when you do that is if I'm a business leader and say I'm accomplished at manufacturing or pharmaceuticals or whatever it happens to be, and I get someone here talking a bunch of technical garbage, right, that I don't understand, I'm going to assume it's a technical problem. And if you don't solve this technical problem, there's a failure, there's an incident in the next year or two, I'm going to fire you and hire somebody else that can solve this technical problem because you have failed as a technical person. That is the implicit expectation that happens. And so without meaning to, organizations are setting up their security teams and themselves for failure because all they're going to do is rotate every 12 to 18 to 24 months a different security team, security leadership team, blaming the incidents on them without realizing that, hey, my business line leader said, I want this much productivity and money out of this so I can help the company grow. And then their technology people say, okay, that means we have 0 maintenance windows or 2 hours once a year. And then that means they can't patch. And then the security team is stuck holding the bag for decisions they weren't in control of. Because when that business team said, I want this target, and oh, by the way, I won't fund any redundant systems to help you patch or cloud-based modernization or whatever they need to keep it maintained properly, then they have created security risk completely outside of the control of the security team. And so that's one of the biggest challenges we see is that this miscommunication, the bad assumptions, all of these come together and you're blaming people that are completely out of control or any control over the situation for the outcomes, while the other people are continuing on blissfully ignorant of the fact that they're causing this downtime for themselves. And so it's challenging, right? Because we've been doing this for like 30 years. And so there's so much backlog out there. It's like, how do you even blame someone for stuff? And so I'll do one last thing because you want to ask a question, but I'm very, very passionate about the difference between accountability and blame. Blame is, I don't want to do anything different. It's his or her fault. It's their fault and leave me alone. Accountability is, I know this is part of my job. I recognize it. It's an intrinsic part of what I do. I have to balance against other things. I have to make difficult trade-offs and choices. And I am accountable for the outcomes, all of them, legal, financial, safety, good and bad. I own all those, and I'm going to think about those, consider those, and make the best decision I can with what it is. That's very different than blame of, he did it, right? And I have kids, right? Because if you blame one kid for something the other does, there is no peace, right? It just work. But we do that in a professional environment because we don't know better.
Yeah, no, I loved your call outs on some of that. And so what I wanted to kind of like pull out of some of what you were saying now and kind of what you've witnessed around all this stuff is, has there been leaders that you've talked to that maybe it's not the CISO, maybe it's board members, other folks that think they want to hire these types of individuals, and maybe they get confused about the actual kind of individuals that they should have in those roles? Because some of what you described, at least in my experience, like throughout my career, has been, I've been part of those organizations where the CISO was very technical. And so we didn't get any additional budget. We didn't solve like actual business problems. We were firefighting. And it was extremely frustrating because it's like, we sell widgets. This is what the business cares about. They care about selling widgets. and you're trying to tell them that we need a CSPM. Like, it's like, it doesn't land like with them. So I don't know if you've encountered any of that role confusion, and like, how does that impact like the downstream effects, like in an
100%.
organization?
And that's also the reason why we're putting so much time and effort at the open group into defining roles, security roles and responsibilities and accountabilities. And, it's funny, like, you mentioned this book here, right? This was supposed to be one book, right? This is the first of a series that's going to end up being 7 or 8 long, because we made the promise, we did this whole thing. We said, we're going to cover all the different roles, responsibilities inside and outside security. And as we kept going and doing the research, there's a graphic which we can put a link to and all that in the articles there, that has all these different roles. There's 73 of them, by the way, that we found as support functions to date. That's the number that we found. We took those roles from the playbook and we actually contributed those to the open group standard, because it was like, there's no point in this being a playbook thing. This should be a standard. And of those 73 roles, there is exactly one that makes you money and accomplishes your mission. And that's your information workers and frontline workers. And that's your doctors, your nurses, your truck drivers. That is the people that actually accomplish the mission, save lives, make money, pull the oil out of the ground, whatever it happens to be that your business that you're in. And all the rest, even the CEO, the board, the technology teams, the security teams, they're all support functions, right? We have to recognize that we're a support function. We're an enablement function to help make sure they can do their job safely, securely, financially soundly, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so, that's what blew this thing up into a series, because we didn't quite realize we were committing to it. We said, this is the format, because we know what the industry needs. And oh, by the way, that's going to take at least a chapter per role, depending on the role. And it's like, oh my gosh, right? Like, we've just got this massive sprawl of stuff. And so we kind of paused work on the playbooks for a little while and said, okay, we have to finish these roles. And so that's the focus at the open group, is defining those and saying, for each of these roles, whether you're CEO, board member, finance person, marketing person, technology engineer, GRC person, whatever it happens to be, here's the job and the mission. Here's the responsibilities or accountabilities. If you're in security, it's a responsibility. If you're outside of security and you own risk, you own a technology, you manage a technology, whatever it is, there's an intrinsic accountability that comes with ownership and management and that other job responsibility you have. But what do you do? What are the responsibilities, accountabilities? What assets do you own? So, for example, if I'm a cloud engineer or a server engineer, I own the clouds, the containers, and all those kind of things, and I have to manage those securely. I have to know about the threats to those. I have to understand all those and what could go wrong, because it's on me, because I own the reliability problems. I own any bugs in the code I write. I own those things. So why wouldn't I own the security outcomes of it? Now, I need experts to tell me what to worry about from a security standpoint, but it's my system. I own it, right? And same thing's true of a CFO as well. They own accounts payable, accounts receivable. They own fraud as a problem, right? They have fraud of people walking in the door, financial fraud anyway, of, stuff that's coming in over fax machines, over phones. So why wouldn't they cover financial fraud over email? And why is this suddenly a technical security problem to magically figure out if this person is legit or not, or if their account's been compromised? And there's stuff that security needs to do to help them with that, because obviously there are technical aspects of the problem. But we have to recognize that, we have to have all of these roles doing their things. And so we say security is part of everyone's job. And it literally is everyone. You could design a job that has absolutely no security impact whatsoever, but it's going to be useless. Even a summer intern needs to look at some data, access some systems. They need to do something. Otherwise, they're not adding value to the organization. So literally everything comes with a security.
Mark, I'm a huge advocate of that statement. Security is everybody's job. But what counter statements and counter arguments I've also heard is, then why would we hire security people if it's everybody's job? Like, why do I need experts in my organization? Why do I need consultants who would advise me? If it's everybody's job, then maybe it's just becoming more like a training issue or educational issue than bringing the experts, bringing the consultants to advise me. What's your opinion on that one?
I like the analogy of a bodyguard because a bodyguard's part of their job is to do the things that you cannot do for yourself to protect yourself, right? Take a bullet, scan the area and make sure that there's nothing dangerous in it, check the building to make sure there's no bombs in it. There's certain specialized things that you need a technical expert to do. But at the same time, there's stuff that I need to do that if I'm going to say I'm going to go out drinking all night and I'm going to tell the bodyguard to stay home, that's a bad idea, right? As if I'm like a high profile, executive or something,
Like target.
walking around the streets of New York at, dark 30, right? Like, so it's a mix of the two things, right? And so you'd have to recognize that, yes, these people need to do this, but they also need expert education in their language that they can understand.
Sure.
And so that's where we're off balance as a security industry. We're really good at bringing technical people in, or at least we're really good at bringing people into triage roles and seeing if they survive as a tier 1 SOC analyst. That's what we're good at. And then if they are, then let's promote them up into something else because obviously they went through the gauntlet, right? But we aren't really good at bringing people in that have those people skills that can say, tell me about the security thing. Okay, now I know how to land with this with the CFO. I can link it to here. I can link it to safety. I can link it to the organizational culture. We need to have a holistic approach to security that looks at it and looks at the skill sets we need. That's part of what we're doing at those standards is not just what you have to do and what assets you protect, but what are the knowledge, skills, and abilities to protect those assets and perform those tasks.
Right.
That's a big part of what we're putting out there. It's sort of our gift to the education industry of please stop teaching people about phishing emails and teach them about how to do secure in their job. Please.
Yeah. Mike, you're one of the recognized voices when it comes to zero trust. So how does zero trust change the way we should think about the ownership, to your point, especially between IT, security, and the business? Because there's always tug of war going on. Security is saying that IT is not doing what I'm asking them. And then business is saying that IT and security is not letting me do my job. So there's always tug of war going on. How does zero trust change the way of when it comes to thinking about ownership?
So the way I've been thinking about zero trust a lot lately is through a very simple frame, which is it changes two broken assumptions. The first is the obvious one. If we put it behind the firewall, it's magically safe, right? We all know that one just doesn't work anymore between phishing, cred theft, and all the mobile cloud stuff outside of it. Like, I'm sorry, yes, if you put a raw unpatched thing out on the raw internet, it will get scanned and exploited. Great. But putting it behind the firewall doesn't protect against everything, right? So we got that. That's one assumption. And it's a changed assumption. We're still doing security. We're still doing all the same stuff we did. We're just changing the assumption that it's good enough, right? The other assumption that we're changing with zero trust is security is the security team's job. So that's the second false assumption that we need to go back and say, you know what? It's not everyone's job. Literally, as a CEO, you have to worry about security only, but it is part of your job. It's one of the things you have to balance, including geopolitical risks and this and that, and whatever else is going on in the world. And you just have to recognize it's part of everyone's job. It's just like another tattoo that you didn't want, but guess what? Welcome to the job.
So with that, Mark, for companies that have treated, zero trust traditionally as a tech problem, what have you seen, those organizations when they realize that it isn't just a tech problem, like you were kind of mentioning? What cultural or organization changes have you seen, make or break with zero trust adoption at different companies?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it is a transformation and it does need to start with business leadership. There's a bunch of stuff you can do organically. If you don't change that assumption of security is everyone's job, part of everyone's job. Like there's things you can do technically. You can improve the way you do it. You can make your teams talk better. You can build organically relationships with the technology teams, et cetera. But if they're not held accountable for that, and it's like, I do this security work or I do this other stuff I'm getting paid for, there's going to be like a cap, right? It's going to be like this fuzzy, hard limit. And it's fuzzy because you can't quite define where it's going to be, but it's hard because you're never going to get above it if people aren't paid correctly, if people aren't incented correctly, if people aren't held accountable for the things they need to do. You're going to be able to do a certain amount through influence and relationships, right? And then there's going to be a certain point where you're just not making progress. You're getting diminishing returns for all of your effort because quite frankly, they're not paid to care, or sometimes they're paid not to care.
So with that being said, what have you witnessed like from an incentive standpoint, for those folks to care about security or to care about, this zero trust thing. Like, I know a lot of organizations rebrand it, but curious to see what you've witnessed.
So we actually do have a good case study. We've been working on this for a number of years and kind of, getting this structured and figured out. And then about a year and a half, 2 years ago, I think now is when Microsoft started our Secure Future initiative. And so we got our case study because Microsoft kind of made some of the same realizations at sort of a leadership level that we were already working on through the guidance and through some of the standards and playbook work and whatnot. That, you know what, if you pay your senior leaders for, only the sort of productivity outputs, and then they're going to ignore the security bugs, right? For example, in a software company. And it's just not going to get done, or it's never going to get prioritized sufficiently to burn them down at a decent rate. Right? And so what Microsoft did is, hey, part of the incentive structure and the pay of the executives is dependent on, did you meet your security metrics of burning down X percentage of bugs or whatever it happens to be. There's a lot of details in the Secure Future Initiative or SFI reports where you can look up. I don't have them memorized, obviously. But the key thing that we found is having the senior leaders accountable for it affects not just their decisions, but very importantly, the people that work for them. Because there's a lot of decisions that don't make it up to the sort of, CEO's direct report levels. And those are handled by the teams and the staff and the managers and leaders and directors underneath them. And if they know what their boss is paid on, they're going to be making decisions that support that. And if their boss is paid on making sure the security stuff is done, they're going to be doing that. If their boss isn't paid on it, they're going to ignore it, right? Without ever bringing it to that boss. And so we found that it's really powerful to have that incentive structure throughout the organization to make sure that, people have a very clear signal for it. And of course, it's not just the numbers and the metrics. It's a culture. It's modeling the behavior. It's showing people the right way. It's not accepting it when someone says, well, we had to ship this because and skip the security. Well, that's not acceptable. And calling that out either privately or in public, that sends a very strong social signal that changes future decisions.
I think on that, let's take an example. Maybe you can help us, Mark. When and how can leaders, especially I would say business leaders, how can leaders communicate security responsibilities effectively if they're talking to IT or security or non-technical terms? So if I'm a business leader, let's say my responsibility is I'm an e-commerce business, and my responsibility is to get the product out as soon as possible. But when it comes to security responsibilities, how do I effectively talk about that with technical or non-technical? Like anything that you have seen or any examples you have researched?
Well, you have to speak, you have to connect it to something people know or something people are paid on, right? And so in the case of, like, say I was a business leader of an e-commerce one, and I want to express to my technical and other teams that I want to focus on security, be like, listen, I'm going to link it to something that they know and care about. Listen, we care about our customers. We care about their safety. We don't want to be their, the reason that they have to go through all this kind of pain of a security breach of their information. We don't want to be in the news. We don't want to be shut down and with, dealing with the ransomware. We have to tie it to their experience and the symptom they're going to feel, and then say, this is what we're doing. These are the kind of decisions we're going to make. And then reinforce that, not just that was a great speech. Now I'm going to move on to my real job, right? You've got to then reinforce that. And as opportunities come up, hey, listen, there was this interesting situation where his team was wondering, should we do this thing or should we do this thing or move to the post-quantum or whatever it happens to be as a question. And the team made the right call, or I advised them to do this. Help celebrate when the right thing is going on and show people that way of like, this is the kind of thing I expect from you. And everybody goes, oh, okay, I'm going to be doing those kind of things because that's what the bosses value.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I love that that's kind of what you witnessed and everything. Something that I wanted to share super quickly is like, recently I started a new job at a company called Zealous, and something that I've seen resonate, and maybe it's just another form of OKRs, is the organization set basically what they call VFOs, or vital few objectives, so that there's no question about what you should be marching towards. So I love that you called that out, because that is the North Star that everybody can operate against. And it's like, if the thing that you're doing doesn't feed into that in some way, shape, or form, then, it's a question of whether you should be working on the thing that you're working on in the first place. So, kind of pivoting, the conversation and kind of looking to the future, right? What do you think the next generation of security roles is going to look like? Especially, I'm really surprised this is the first time we're mentioning AI, in this episode. But
It is good. We have a lot going on already.
yeah, we did a good job. We did a good job. We made it almost to the end. But with kind of like the landscape as it stands today, what do you think that's going to look like? Even a year, maybe 5 years from now?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, obviously, prediction is notoriously difficult, especially about the future. Sorry, I've forgotten the origin of the quote, but one of my favorites. I'm sure someone on social media is gonna point it out. But the interesting thing is, I don't think the jobs to be done. I mean, you obviously have to secure the AI, and you have to find new ways to sort of threat model it and deal with all the different specifics of AI threats and the new attack surface was. So there is an additive factor to the jobs of what security has to do for securing AI. But when I think about like, how is AI going to impact my job? The thing that we come to appreciate is like a role is a bundle of functions, right? These are the different things that are related to each other to be the first human that looks at it. For example, for a tier one kind of SOC analyst, right? And a tier two is the much more in-depth kind of stuff, right? But a role is basically a bundle of those related functions, right? And that's, if you're in a very small organization, guess what? You got 6 bundles. Congratulations, right? Um, and then under those functions are a bunch of tasks. So in order to investigate, a routine incident, I have to do depending on how you define it, anywhere between 2 and 12 things, right? And so I think what's happening is AI is going to be really good at either partially or completely doing some of those tasks. And so I think of it like a whole bunch of different sort of like bar graphs. And what is AI good at today that it can fill in just by the fact that it does generative AI, understands our language? And then what if we teach it some things and we constrain it to not tell them grandma's bomb making recipe? What more can it do, right? Safely and reliably. And then, as we go and do these innovations, we're going to see more and more jobs that are being augmented and further augmented. I don't think the jobs to change actually or jobs to be done are actually going to change. I mean, I could be wrong on that. I also don't think that there are many jobs that you're going to want to say, I completely trust the automation on this. I'm never going to have a human in a loop, right? Like, I think we're going to still need that, even if it's like one human supervising a bunch of agents and making sure they're not going off the track. Now, that human's going to have to be good at that job and experienced at it. And of course, what is the path to get them to there if the AI has been doing all the little menial tasks? So there's some definite challenges in there, but I don't really see the jobs themselves changing, except to adapt to the fact that you need to know how to use AI effectively and how to supervise it, et cetera, as we learn how to coexist with it.
Testing Foundation, we run a lot of boot camps and internships for those who are coming out of like college or early junior level resources who are trying to get into the workforce. And we get this question a lot. Hey, with AI, are the jobs being eliminated? And I usually answer with, hey, before we got calculator, we used to actually have the math. So we calculated on a paper manually. Then we got calculators. Same if you're a little nerdy, if you remember, before Wireshark, we still had the PCAPs. You had to read the hex and all that. But the point I'm trying to make is the jobs will evolve, but the person is still there as long as you can pick up the next, whatever needs to be happening in IT or technology, or again, to Mark's point, translating that technology into the business, humans still are needed. Yes, it might not be exactly what the 15 years ago, like I started my career, I'm going to date here, IBM ES400. Do I still use it? Not really. When I can transition to network security, then it was cloud security. It's the next thing, but human is still in the loop to do those things. So I think that's always going to be the part where Mark just said that human is going to be in the loop for making sure that the next calculator is doing its job.
100%. And the jobs will change and evolve, and they will always change and evolve.
Yeah.
But I don't think they're going to go away. We may need less of certain jobs. We may find that the first human ends up doing more advanced things that actually looks an incident. there's definitely going to be an evolution, but I don't see the jobs just being wholesale outsourced to AI and then, we're done. I don't see that happening at all. The whole autonomous SOC thing is more of a myth.
Different problems will come up, right? I mean, to secure AI, now we need additional source of resources, or there's a new function will come out of the threats we will see with AI we need to train the next generation of the workforce on that one. So again, for sure, what we know today might reduce the people needed, but then there's going to be a new problem where people are needed.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be deep fake spotters or whatever, right? There's going to be something that comes from this that is a new problem to be solved.
Steve, I cut you.
Yeah, no, you definitely took the words out of my mouth, Victor. I was going to play devil's advocate for a moment here, because, I wonder, to your point, Victor, and some of the stuff that you mentioned, Mark, I sit there and I wonder, how are these folks going to get the skills that they need to be an advanced, individual to fill the roles that are going to be needed in the future? And so I sit there and I kind of just wonder, it's like that whole South Park meme of like, gather, a bunch of folks, who want to do cybersecurity. Step 2 is question mark. Step 3 is profit.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
no episode.
Yeah. So I'm just sitting here and I'm like, I wish somebody had the answer around this right now. I know, again, it's still early days and we're in the infancy around what AI agents, all of those things can do. But I do worry about the talent pipeline of the future being discouraged from, Victor, you mentioned PCAPs and Wireshark and all those things. To know an agent is doing wrong, you do need to know the fundamentals of some of those things.
Yeah.
And so
you need basic arithmetic before you know that the calculator is doing it wrong, right?
So
yeah,
I wonder how somebody can jump from like straight out of school, or maybe they skip the traditional path. And so, Mark, I don't know if you had any take on that.
Yeah, I think what it is it's a problem to be solved, right? I don't think it's insurmountable. I think what it means is that we have to think about this deliberately and recognize the problem we're solving. Again, our contribution through the role standard is, what do each of these different roles need to know as a knowledge, skill, or ability, right? So we've got that. We're working at defining those as we go through the 73 plus roles. And then the second question is, then how do we best do it? And that's where, we need to start looking outside of cyber and, and the fact that we ran people through a bunch of technical boot camps and then threw them in the SOC, and maybe the boot camp was related, right? Like, obviously we know that what we're doing isn't working, right? But that's without question. There's a lot of people that are sort of stuck in that path, and I feel for them. And then the next piece is, okay, how do we actually come up with a good path that takes someone from, sort of a basic bachelor's or high school level of education to the point where they have the skills and abilities to get into this, that, and the other, entry level job A, B, C, or D, with the people oriented job, tech oriented job. Like, once we actually know what the destination is, hey, we're going to the Emerald City, what is the individual yellow brick road for each of those? And that's the work that has to be done. Right. And it's not just going to be a magically, like the same thing we did, like, it's all about Gregorian chance. If it's not Gregorian chance, I don't like it. If you haven't looked at the Wireshark thing, that's going to be a part of it. But like, you have to make sure you walk the path and say, this is what we need. Here's the outcome we need of people that have these skills. And of course, flexibility and adaptability, because things change a lot. And then how do you take someone and build that? And we're not answering those questions. We're just slapping a bunch of, hey, here's a certification that people value, so let's charge people money to train them on it, right? Like, we haven't been working on this as an industry very well. And so we're hoping that by at least defining the end state, we'll have a better shot as an industry.
I was totally going to echo like what you were mentioning around that, is like, I don't think we've even defined that now.
So what would you say you do here?
I know we're having so much fun and we went way over the time. So, Mark, I do want to wrap on this one. If you could give one advice to CISOs or architects trying to modernize their organization structure around zero trust, what would that be?
I would say learn as much as you can about the business you're in, the people that are running it, how they're paid. Learn as much as you can about them and understand how security can benefit them, because most of the time you're sort of in an influence kind of position. And then when the roles and glossary standard does come out that defines the board and the CEO and all that, which should be sometime before November of this year, so sometime this month, then definitely use that as an educational tool as well. And that, hey, listen, here's what the Open Group did to define fiduciary duties, and then into the accountabilities of leadership. Like, this is what a well-running org is. And, is this something that we want to look at adopting? Obviously, you don't have the power to tell the CEO what to do, but at least there's a well thought out thing you can make sure you educate those business leaders.
Sure.
And so that's, just learn about it from an influence perspective, because you need that, and in a relationship perspective and all that kind of stuff, just being a leader. And then second, start to use those publications that we have to change the conversations around.
Yeah. And learn storytelling. I think that's the one advice you gave during the podcast.
Apart from the minds.
Yeah. Awesome. Mark, thank you so much for sharing your insights on how defining clear roles, responsibilities can help organizations actually operationalize zero trust. It's been a great having you on the Zero Trust Journey podcast. Thank you very much.
That's a wrap on the Zero Trust Journey. Now it's your turn. Step into the spotlight, share your story, and be part of the journey. Subscribe to Zero Trust Journey on LinkedIn for the latest news, events, and giveaways. Until next time.